Good afternoon, everyone. This is Professor Abhyankar, Girish Abhyankar. I am working as currently as assistant professor with Symbiosis Law School. I am associated with Symbiosis Law School past 13 years. My area of specialization is criminal law. I have done my PhD in the field of criminal law in 2014, and I teach subjects of IPC and Criminal Procedure Code. Today the point of discussion will be credit card frauds. Let us first understand what are the objectives of today's session. The first objective is to understand the concept, nature of credit card frauds. Secondly, what are the different types of credit card frauds. Thirdly, understanding the mechanism, the prevention mechanism of fighting against credit card frauds. What is the approach of court as far as the negligence of the customer in case of credit card frauds, where we are going to refer to few cases and the judgment of Supreme Court with respect to the negligence with respect to credit card frauds. And lastly, after summarizing that how the system or the situation can be much better after the demonetization, the decision taken by the government in 2016. So these are our learning objectives of today's session. Before directly starting with the nature, it is very essential to understand that why the credit card frauds, those have increased, what are the causes, what are the parties which are involved. When we talk about credit cards, what is its nature, how to take preventions while obtaining cards, why the cards are obtained, and other allied things. As far as the background, as far as the historical development, if we look into different kinds of frauds, that 90s, the situation, the nature of or different types of frauds which were committed, those were old types with respect to forgeries, check forgeries, or share market scams. These were the older forms of frauds which we came across during 90s and up to 2000. But the new evolution of different frauds which have evolved because of technological development or wide use of internet while making in e-commerce and trading or different transaction or making payments, it has posed a lot of challenges for banking, insurance and other financial service giving industry. Banking industry itself has undergone a lot of change. The industry has experienced considerable growth of post liberalization, but still it has faced great problems or different problems of fraud, money laundering or corporate governance, etc. That's why it becomes very essential to understand how the developments have taken place. Technological developments, if we look into the technology which was or modus operandi, that was much insistence through the manual work which was performed by banking industry. But due to rapid development in technology, computerization, the frauds that those have evolved in modern era or specifically during 2000-2015, we come across the majority of them belong to internet fraud, cyber crimes or updated technology related crimes which are committed while committing frauds. So this is a new evolved type of crime when we talk about credit card frauds. It is very essential to know that, or all of us know that demonetization, the step taken by government, the intention of the government behind demonetization step, though it was for the purpose of black money, to cull out the black money or to deal with the problem of black money, but government itself is more keen on using the internet or smart cards for the purpose of making payments or in the field of trade and commerce. Definitely, it has posed a lot of challenges as far as all stakeholders are concerned, including the customer, banking, insurance, or those industries which are providing facilities in the service giving industry. Banking company is a service giving or service rendering industry. It provides the banking services, and it has, as I mentioned, that it has gone a lot of changes due to the computerization that has taken place in banks. Today it's an era of e-governance, and in order to achieve the objects behind demonetization, definitely the systems, well updated systems or preventive measures, the government could have taken care of these aspects. Vigilant customers, right use of technology, all these things were required. But right now we are not concerned with the right or wrong decision taken by the government behind demonetization. When we talk about the nature, it's a plastic cards which are used for the purpose of making payments. These are the plastic cards known as debit cards or debit cards. Credit cards are generally obtained for various purposes. Majority times it is for the purpose of making transactions or obtaining a loan from those authorized agencies of the government. Understanding the nature, when it comes to the nature of credit card frauds, two concepts or two terms are there. Credit card frauds. First, the concept of fraud and what is credit card fraud. As far as the definition of fraud is concerned, as per the definition of RBI, there are few elements which are involved in the definition. The first element, that it's a deliberate act of commission or omission. Second element, it is carried out during a course of banking transaction or in the books of accounts maintained manually or under computer system in banks. Third, it results into wrongful gain to a person who is doing that deliberate act. And lastly, causing a temporary loss to the bank, or it may not cause that monetary loss to the bank. These are the elements of fraud as per the RBI definition. When we talk about credit card frauds, necessarily one can understand the fraud, that deliberate act which is committed with the help of credit card, that is credit card frauds. It includes not only theft but other types of variety of actions, and it is not limited only to physical stealing of that card and the fraud which is committed after stealing of the card. So one must note at this juncture that not necessarily for the purpose of committing credit card fraud that the stealing physically the card is essential element for the purpose of credit card fraud. Before proceeding further, it is very essential to understand who are the parties which are involved in the credit card transactions or credit card frauds, or the frauds which takes place through this credit card or the plastic cards which are used for the purpose of making transactions. The first party which is involved is the customer to whom the card is issued. Second, bank which issues the card on the basis of account or some balance, not necessarily that for obtaining credit card the person should have bank account. Third element, which is third factor which is important, or third party which is involved in this credit card frauds, is the agency with whom the bank has tie-ups which are authorized by the government after fulfilling certain norms. For example, Visa, MasterCard, or nowadays government has started with Rupee card which is owned by the government to compete with or familiar with or same as of MasterCard or Visa, these older companies who are authorized to issue credit cards to the customers. And the last party, that the fraudster or criminal who commits fraud. These are the parties which are involved in credit card frauds. It is very important to know that why there is need or why people go for credit card. The major objective for obtaining credit card is, first, it might be for the purpose of taking loan, it might be for the purpose of making transactions, it might be for the purpose of making international payments, or there might be various objects why the person obtain cards. In case of credit cards, the different parties are involved. Oftenly the issue is from the customer side with respect to the charges which are debited to his account. It is very essential to know that the credit cards or this form has emerged because of certain policies of the government and demand, and to keep the standards with other developed countries like UK and US. Credit card frauds, as I mentioned, different objectives might be behind for obtaining the credit card. Let us understand the process, which is important to understand the whole credit card fraud concept. That application is essentially made to the agencies or service provider for the purpose of getting the card. On getting the application, personal information is generally asked by these agencies. After giving this sharing for personal information, after certain period satisfying those norms, the customer is issued that card. And for all these services, please, one must note that these are the services, all are paid services, nothing that comes free. So bank charges for these type of services certain percentage. The percentage might be ranging from 0.3 to ranging up to 0.3% depending upon the nature of agreement. It's very essential, equally important, that credit card, whenever it is issued, it is through agreement. There is an agreement between the customer and the bank. So one must be careful while entering into such application or signing up such agreement along with the bank or the service provider. So this is about the application or the process which is followed in case of credit card when it is issued by that service provider on the application by the customer. After issuing of card, when the card is swiped or put into transaction or transaction is made, periodical statements are issued for which the customer is entitled to receive those statements to verify that he is being charged for right kind of a charges. There is no overcharging which is done by these banks which are issuing credit cards. As per the new guidelines of RBI, that for the purpose of obtaining credit card, when the application is made, the consent of the customer that must be expressly obtained by the bank, because the cases have been reported that there was on the basis of cards which were issued which ended up with the complications and the basis of implied consent. Hidden charges were charged and the person was absolutely not known that the credit card has been issued to him. In order to avoid these circumstances, now as per new guidelines, expressly the consent of the customer must be obtained. After discussing this process, next point of discussion will be why these credit card frauds happens. Before going to different kinds of credit card frauds, let us understand what are the causes. It is major cause behind a credit card fraud is sharing of personal information when it happens negligently, when it happens unknowingly, when it happens by the unauthorized use in a different manner. Otherwise, duplication or there are different types how the credit card fraud is possible. So these are the causes. It might be sometimes due to active involvement or with the knowledge or knowing involvement of the insider, that is bank employee, in cases of frauds. So there might be reasons, different reasons behind such credit card frauds. After knowing these causes or the reasons behind, let us now go to the next point of discussion, that is what are the different types of credit card frauds. Starting with first type, that is application fraud, where on the basis of existing account the application is made fake application is made to obtain the personal information, that after receiving the personal information on basis of such fake application, it is being used for the purpose of making the process and obtain fake payment or the transmission of money. The second type is multiple imprints, that when the card is swiped, generally it takes one or two printouts. One is given for the customer and one is kept by the merchant. One a merchant or trader or with whom the transaction is performed is one of the important party as far as the credit card fraud is concerned. Without the permission, that fraudulently that merchant takes multiple prints which are being put to use, produced to the bank for the purpose of obtaining payment. The next is altered credit card, where obtaining the basic information, personal information, that the personal information, the drastic changes are made into that personal information, and the person who is owning the card is not aware about the alteration, and that card is used, put into process without permission for the purpose of committing fraud, transmission of money or other purposes, and that is called as altered information, personal information, and this is one of the type of credit card fraud. Duplicate card, the third or the next one is duplicate card, that from the original, when the card is stolen, physically there is a stealing of card, not necessarily but many a times that duplicate card is prepared and that duplicate card is put into the process for the purpose of committing fraud. Next is terminal takeover. Terminal takeover, the bank or that personal information, the whole data is stored in one computer or with one agency who is authorized to process the transaction after verifying that necessary data. When such kind of a personal information is hacked, stolen or taken away without the permission or fraudulently, and the whole data is being sold in the black market for the purpose of committing fraud, this is called as terminal takeover. Recently the attack, the credit card with respect to the cards or ATM cards that has happened, this is a good example of terminal takeover, that sometimes that all the information is hacked and which is used for the purpose of committing fraud. Next is mail order or telephone order, that person gets telephone call in the name of fake company and given information as if that is a genuine company, and the personal information is demanded and person falls prey, customer falls prey and shares his personal information, and that personal information is put into use for the purpose of committing fraud or transmitting the money. Next is merchant collusion, that in collusion with the merchant or agreement, the fraudster that copies the information or gets the information and uses it for the purpose of committing fraud. Scheming, where with the help of some small device, that electronic device, the chip information in the credit card, that information is copied and is used for the purpose of committing fraud. Phishing is very common example, rampantly used for the purpose of committing fraud, that giving information or through email or through SMS, and the personal information is recovered from such emails. Why I must mention this, that in case of phishing, when it comes to credit card fraud or frauds are concerned, the people are not aware that for a certain time if that email remains into inbox, immediately there is a hidden program which runs through and copying the patterns of behavior or codes which is followed by that person. That behavior is observed secretly, that is not known to that person who is using the computer or the system or the credit card, and that pattern is used for the purpose of committing fraud. Next is Leibniz loop fraud, where the loop or look is fit into the POS or ATM machines to block the card. So the customer is under impression that his card has been blocked, and he has to now refer the matter to the bank. But actually the card is not blocked, and after the customer, after leaving the spot, immediately that card is taken out, and which is used for the purpose of committing fraud. Shoulder surfing, that placing that in such a situation or nearby the customer so that he can see the pattern behavior or the code which is followed, and he copies it. He is in a position, is closely placed by the customer, and he gets the information, copies the information and use it for the purpose of committing fraud. Next will be repacked delivery. In cases of repacked delivery, the goods which are purchased through internet or through websites through fraud, those are again packed newly as if a new product, and those same products are sold through auction on email to different customers. So these are different kinds or types of credit card frauds. After understanding different types of credit card frauds, let us now, since there is a drastic increase in credit card frauds, it's very essential to have a good mechanism to prevent these types of frauds. The measures which are recommended by RBI, those are on similar types as recommended in US by the concerned agencies. When it comes to the mechanism to deal with credit card frauds, some of the RBI guidelines, RBI while issuing those circulars has included the same guidelines as issued by US Federal Trade Commission, which includes like generally don't share your personal information, or don't sign multiple receipts after swapping of card. Until and unless you get back your card, don't leave card out of your sight. So same kind of guidelines to large extent the RBI circular which provides. Now after discussing this mechanism, as per the RBI guidelines, there are internal procedures or internal safeguards that has to be taken by these service providers or facility providers giving this credit card facility. Apart from that, additional measures in the form of identity checks, then verifying identity, that photo identity, giving them alerts from time to time after each transaction, or in specific cases if the transaction exceeds more than 5,000. Blocking of a card, that is one of the major thing, that the precautionary measure that can be taken by customer immediately after detecting the card. The alternative measures, when it comes to alternative measures, the trend which has developed now, that insurance in case of cards is respective of the nature of the card is being issued. Let it be membership card, let it be credit card, let it be other cards giving other facilities. Now the insurance, in order to protect the customer from the loss which has to bear, now the latest trend that the insurance is given, and one has to be there is no need to mention while mentioning that or signing the insurance contract, one has to be very careful what terms and conditions are included by that service providing agency. In India, there are only few authorized agencies which are given authority under RBI circular by RBI as far as the credit card issue of credit card is concerned. Only those banks or certain agencies are authorized after fulfilling those standard norms. When it comes to legal framework, as far as the credit card frauds are concerned, there are few statutes or the provisions which will be attracted in order to give remedy to the customer in case of credit card fraud. The first and the foremost will be Indian Ombudsman Scheme of 2006, where the matter can be taken up if the consumer is not satisfied with the remedy which is given by bank, that is reversal of those charges or paying back or making those losses good. He can take up that matter to Indian Ombudsman. So the Indian Ombudsman Scheme 2006. Second is Indian Penal Code. Under Indian Penal Code, there are specific provisions for fraudulent, dishonest use of property, misappropriation of property, certain provisions that with intention or intentionally or knowingly using stolen property. Such kind of provisions are attracted under Indian Penal Code. Those are relevant for as far as the credit card frauds are concerned. The next is Information Technology Act. After the section 43 and section 66, that is more relevant when it comes to credit card frauds. And the last is banking codes and standards board of India, the body which or the committee which has been established by RBI and which is meant to give remedy in case of credit card frauds. So to give remedy to the victims falling prey of those frauds. So this is the legal framework in general which is very relevant as far as credit card frauds are concerned. Now when it comes to alternative measures, as I mentioned that insurance is one of the measure which has developed now, and alternative measures which when it comes to credit card frauds, the types of security checks that we come across to avoid and which are mandatory as far as the RBI circular 2013 guidelines of RBI are very relevant and important when it comes to credit card frauds. That how the card card should be issued by those agencies, what are the terms and conditions which must be satisfied, which are those agencies which are licensed or given license for the issuing credit card. All these matters are mentioned under 2013 guidelines of RBI. Now lastly, that alternative measures, after alternative measures, the measures that we come across today in terms of username, password, CVV in additional measure before the validating transaction. An additional measure that we come across today is OTP, one time password, in order to avoid such kind of frauds. Now similar development which is in other countries, the countries or other developed countries like US, those have gone to an extent of screen verification when the internet through payment is made through internet or this technology, that in additional of these measures OTP, one step ahead, a screen verification of the owner of that card. We have not gone to that extent, but definitely considering the rise in credit card transactions, I think we need to adopt such kind of measures to avoid such kind of frauds. When it comes to the remedial measure, what kind of a remedial setup that is there for the purpose of customer in case of frauds. RBI guidelines, if we the circulars, we look into 2017 or latest guidelines which are more prone towards customer and taking a stringent approach as far as the banks are concerned or those agencies providing banking services are concerned or issuing cards are concerned. The RBI is very stringent or serious about these matters. When it comes to credit card frauds or the guidelines which are new guidelines which have come through 2017, that if the matter is reported within 3 days and immediately it is informed to the bank, then there will be zero liability. Zero liability, the RBI is more interested in introducing this concept in India. Now it is limited up to 3 days. Within 4 to 7 days, it can be up to 5,000 rupees. And especially in cases where the bank employee is found involved in bank frauds or credit card frauds, the entire liability the bank has to bear. So these are the new things which have come through RBI guidelines. Still much more to awaiting as we will proceed with these plastic cards and the use of these plastic cards. Now let us consider a few cases. These are not very landmark cases, but these are relating to credit card frauds and the relating issues. JSY versus State. In this case, what happened? The customer went to a hotel, he swiped the card to make a bill payment. His card was taken for the purpose of bill payment. Out of his sight, that card was additionally swapped for making tip payment. It was not informed to him, and his account was debited. And when the case that was referred and the facts were gone through by the court held that there was no negligent act by the customer, or there is no fault of the customer, and he was not informed about the same. So that reverse entry should be made, and he should be again paid those charges by the bank, and the bank is responsible for those additional charges. Dr. Vijaya Kulkarni and Sushma Kulkarni versus SBI. In this case, what happened that the person, his card was swiped in Russia. In case he claimed when it came before court that all the system, the security measures as far as his computer, those were all working fine, and he never swiped his or used his card. But still his card was swiped without his information secretly, or it was that information was hacked and that was used in Russia for the purpose of making payments. And this is how the fraud happened. And in this case specifically, the Supreme Court said that the individual is not in a position to fight against the use agencies or service providers, or in case of transnational issues, or when such kind of issues arose, that is jurisdictional issue, which is a major problem in case of credit card frauds, which is very challenging, and till there is no answer how to deal in such cases. So this case is relating to jurisdictional issue. The next case, Siva Subramaniam versus ICICI Bank. What happened in this case, facts of the case, that in this case the customer, that he was receiving on regular basis notifications from bank, and one day he received a fake mail, phishing mail, informing him that if you do not share your password or the personal information, your services, bank services, those might be deactivated. On getting this mail, he shared his personal information, and because of after this, his huge amount was transferred on the basis of that sharing of information from his bank account. When after that he noticed it that a huge transaction has taken place because of this sharing of information, but the bank refused to accept the liability, and that case went up to the court. The court decided that there was no negligent act or sharing of personal information by the customer, and he has just fallen prey, and in such cases bank has to bear the liability. Another additional measure when we talk about preventive measures, now as per the recent RBI guidelines, if the complaint has not been resolved, remedy is not given in case of complaint of credit card fraud or fraudulent transmission by the bank within 90 days, then the customer is entitled for rupees 100 per day charges to recover those charges from bank. Lastly, if we want to summarize, if at all, what recommendations can be made after going through or understanding the nature, different legal mechanisms, parties involved, nature, how we can best summarize that there is a need, first point, to have a centralized agency like in US, which is authorized by the government to take care all situations of credit card frauds. Secondly, there is a need to have a more proactive role to be played by these service providing agencies like bank, not only taking or encouraging the customers for using e-banking or those facilities, but facilitation is more required. Education must be given, because many times we come across that in case of age-old citizens, senior citizens, or even many people, those are not able to handle those issues, to use those services. And last but not the least, as far as the recommendations are concerned, that there is a need of large scale awareness to be spread about these services and utilization in a safe mode, a safe manner by these service providers. Thank you so much.